And we are live.
Yay!
Yes. Welcome, Jim. I appreciate you taking the time tonight.
Hey, no problem at all. Glad to be here.
Good. When you told me that you were going to do this, I was, very grateful. Obviously, we get to work together a good bit on the woodworking shows and have for quite some time. And I think this year you told me that you were on your 10-year tour, 10 years or less. Is that correct?
I don't know if I mentioned that, but it's I would think so. I mean, come on.
Well, I figure, 10 years is minimum. I believe that's what we need you for out there.
Yeah, you can't see my wife from this side here, but she's not in this 10-year plan yet.
Well, that's why I said more or less. I'd like to cover my face. So since we are live, Jim has been an editor for Wood Magazine for over 25 years. If you have not, please.
Well, actually, I was going to say, I don't know that I would call myself, or they would, an editor, but I've been a contributing craftsman, and now I'm writing for them a lot more often than I was in the past. So, yeah, it's nice when you're working on your own, you can kind of create your own business card. So if you want to call me that, I'll print that up.
We are every year you are absolutely fabulous at finishing. Probably one of your pet peeves is finishing. And anytime that I bring something to the show, I tend to make sure that it goes above and beyond, because there's nothing worse than a finish that hasn't been either micro-meshed or steel wooled and then repolished. In your opinion, am I wrong?
Well, I'm a bit picky with my own work. I try to be as understanding as I can with other people's, but sure, I tend to just touch stuff because I'm Italian, and I touch stuff and I'm looking for that really smooth finish, and sometimes I can be a bit disappointed, but it's okay though. It's everybody gets better the longer they do it, but the fun part about teaching it, and again, I hate to repeat teaching things the same all the time, but the nice part about finishing is there's always so much more to learn. There's new products coming out all the time. There's the techniques that go with them, and to be honest, it's kind of fun to tell people about all of the problems I've had, because then they at least feel like, oh, so you've had that problem too, because everybody does.
Yeah.
So it's no different than all of the other demonstrators, educators, and the woodworking shows, and I think all of the people I know that work at Wood all can tell you horror stories about some of the things that didn't go quite according to Hoyle. So there's always help. There's always room for improvement all the time, no matter who you are.
No question about it. And all the years that I've watched you teach at the shows and any of your articles, you try to put some humor into it. And I think that really tends to make it very interesting to some folks.
I've been told that I have a unique sense of humor. And occasionally those little things are left in stories. The magazine gives me an awful lot of latitude, but occasionally I kind of do things that would probably get me in trouble if it were in print. But I think when you're doing it in front of people, that they get the gist and the focus of it. And I think you can have a lot of fun with people. And I do believe that people learn better by equating something to a humorous story than just learning a list of things that they're supposed to be doing, because there's no way to put them in context. But if you hear them in a silly story, and God, there's 1,000 of those, if you hear them in a silly story or some idea that equates a story for them, I think they remember it a little bit easier.
And I have used one of your lines for a lot of years.
By equating something to humor story than just learning a list of things that they're supposed to be doing, because there's no way to put them in context. But if you hear them in a silly story, and God, there's 1,000 of those, if you hear them in a silly story or some idea that equates a story for them, I think they remember it a little bit easier.
Yeah. And I agree. I have used one of your lines for getting some feedback here.
Something to humor story than just learning a list of things that they're supposed to be doing.
Hang on one second, Jim.
But if you hear them in a silly story,
sure. For some reason, we're getting a double here.
Idea that equates a story for them. We're on a loop.
And I think I just killed it.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Is this better? Can you hear this?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Let me just. We are still live streaming. For some reason, it was playing back there, and it may have been something that I pushed there. You know, one of the things that I have used a lot in my own seminars is I'm not sure whether it's a theory or something that you taught me years ago, and I tend to end a lot of my seminars with it, and that is, when someone says your work is beautiful, say thank you and shut up. It could not be more true. And generally when I say that, everyone just absolutely dies laughing. And I always make sure that everyone knows where that came from. And obviously came from you.
Well, I know that for a while, I had written that quite a while ago for a possible submission to the magazine. And at the time they didn't want to do it. And again, because sometimes things in print sound more snarky. And then I think it was very possibly it was after a show we did in Kansas City when the magazine came down to kind of see what I was doing that year. And I did it at a presentation and the people loved it. And I got a call and right away, you still have that story? You know, so, and I guess it's gotten some fairly nice reviews through the magazine because people get it. We're all the same. We can't just accept a compliment. We have to constantly tell people what we think is wrong with it because we don't have a lot of personal confidence. And I believe that that's misplaced. I think the people that you make things for appreciate that because you made them. My little boy, little grandson is so excited. They're coming. It was the last one or the first one, but it's a lot out of that, and it's because you made it for them.
No, I agree. Sandra, have we gotten any questions for Jim yet?
No, you've got to patch up if you want questions.
Oh, absolutely. If you want to know what something about Jim, by all means, please post those questions because, you know, I do have a question for you myself. And you always finish a project with something special and something unique, something that not a lot of us take the time to do, mainly because we're in such a hurry to get it to someone or finish it. And we always forget that little touch. And I always appreciate what it is that you do on a project. If you would tell people what it is that you do to any project that you feel is unique or special to you.
Yeah, you know, I've done this, I think, since I started doing things, and it wasn't a thing of ego at all. It was that I like to put a little signature on there someplace. And when I first started doing this a million years ago, and this was one of the presenters one time told me because I was born just after the earth cooled, that I had ordered a brass heated iron and I would press my name on there, you know, the handcrafted by Jim Heavey kind of thing. And it was okay. Half the time I blew it, you know, because it would burn it too much or not enough. And then you couldn't put the iron back in the same spot every time. So it was just, so I still have it. But but it didn't do as much as I had hoped it would. So I got the idea a long time ago, and probably got it from somebody, because most good ideas are plagiarized anyway. But I started putting a penny in things. The diameter of a penny is the same as a 3/4 inch Forstner bit. And just in setting it with a little bit of epoxy means that it's there. It's brass, or copper, which is pretty cool. And then I put, usually lacquer is my finish of choice. I put lacquer over the top of it and then sign it afterwards. And I've done that forever. And it's just pretty cool now to even see projects that are sitting around the house here that I did and just threw a penny on there in case anybody would ask. That those pennies are around 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years later. It's pretty cool. So it's good. And I hide it. I normally don't like to put it out someplace. I want somebody to find it if they're going to. Again, my joke in the show is, and it's true, is if it were an ego thing, and I can afford it now, it would be a silver dollar out on the front of it someplace with a big signature across the front of it. But it's not. It's meant to just say personally that there's some part of me in that project. And the story I wrote for the magazine suggested that occasionally that's part of your own DNA because you bled on the project someplace. I think just a penny is easier to put in there, and the date is easier to read. Yeah,
and that's the other unique thing that you do, is you always find a penny for the year that you built it, so that you'll never forget. I think that's absolutely a fabulous idea. So Sandra says we do have a question for you. Let me see. Sandra, if you would read that.
Curious to know how long it will take Jim to make a full-size bed for a 13-year-old granddaughter. Just a ballpark idea.
Oh my God.
This is somebody that knows you well.
I think you're being put on the spot.
that same person that said, "No rush, Grandpa." It's no rush. Well, I'll see her on Sunday, and we'll discuss this in a little bit more detail. But yeah, she's had 3 design changes so far.
I see. So it's still in the design department.
And it's not my design yet. I forwarded a couple of ideas which were poo-pooed right away, and in lieu of receiving one from them. So I'm just guessing that maybe this is where this is coming from, but yes, it'll happen pretty quickly once it starts.
Yes, well, the question was pretty specific. So tell me, you are currently, you and the family have moved to North Carolina. You're rebuilding the shop, you're rebuilding the house, and you are having the time of your life. What's going to be your first project?
The first project probably is just to actually get the shop organized. When we moved in here, the summer was just beginning a couple of years ago. And I was afraid to leave my tools out in the garage because they would just all rust out there. So we brought them down and set them in the area that would ultimately become the shop. And I framed out all the walls and everything. Well, everything that also got moved that sat down here wound up getting moved into my shop. So you had to kind of walk sideways to get into some of the tools for a while. I had one single 15 amp outlet. So I had to run some new electric even to get my stuff running for a while. And now that we're all but finished here, we pretty much finished up almost all the rooms and everything. My shop is now devoid most of all of the stuff that used to be in here. So now I can finally start working on my shop. So I've got two walls to frame out yet and insulate and all that stuff and put the ceiling in, and then actually start laying out tools and things. I still work in there. I'm still building things, but it's just been a challenge. So as much as I love this, and sometimes I'm not sure whether or not I like trim carpentry and that kind of thing before woodworking. But now that I'm kind of done with this part of it, it'll be great to get into the shop. Donna's got a couple of suggestions or requests right away that probably may precede the bed set, but a couple of things that I have to build right away so that we can finally move into these other spots. But yeah, that's my plan. It's kind of like you're doing your shop on the outside edges here, and you want it to be running right now, and you know that if you don't put a little planning into this, it's just you're just up a creek. So my thought is I have a couple of different thoughts about what to do. And at the same time, the magazine would like me to chronicle as much of that as I'm doing, because a lot of people are in the same boat. You know, they're either putting up a new shop, they're redoing their old shop or something. So they're asking me to do an awful lot of video and snapshot things, so we can kind of share that with whoever would care, because every shop is so different. But the idea is that at least we'll be giving some people an idea that we're all in this, you know, we're all doing this occasionally together. And I believe that every time you buy a new tool, you're a prime example of that, you find out that that tool doesn't fit in the space that the old one occupied. So now you're trying to figure out a way, well, if I move that a little bit to the left, well, then that messes up this one. So I think the whole object in this is to just think a little bit before we do something and do it right the first time.
Well, and, you know, I'm learning that as I build, you know, I built my shop 5 years ago, but now I'm expanding it because I need different space. And you find that there are certain tools that do real well against the wall, and those that doesn't matter what you do with them, you've got to have that open space for them. Hey, Jim, we've got a few questions for you here. Sandra, why don't you begin with the first one?
Our friend Katrina from the Woodworking shows wants to know, is there a species of wood that you've worked with that you think is underrated?
That's a good question. Maybe, you know, everybody goes and trends into the more beautiful hardwoods and things, but maybe poplar. It's a great wood. It's available almost everywhere. You know, you get it at the big box stores too. It's straight. It doesn't, and most of the stuff that's sold locally here doesn't have a lot of knots and things in it. It machines beautifully. It stains very nicely. And to be honest, in a lot of cases with the really fine furniture, it was the background wood in the backs of a lot of these cabinets and dressers and things, because the wood could be made to look like the species it was trying to copy, and yet a lot less expensively and with
oh, I hope we haven't lost you there. Jim, it's saying that your bandwidth is low. Are you there? You know, just to add, while you're getting maybe unstuck there, you know, something else that we did learn about poplar this year when we did the moon log, when Ron Herman was with us, you know, I told him that anytime that you sticker wood, you need to stay with the same species. And of course, Ron is the king of wood, told us that poplar is one of the only woods that you can use as a sticker, and it won't mar or stain the wood that you're trying to sticker. So I thought that was kind of unique. Looks like we've lost Jim for a minute here. We're going to get him back.
There we go.
There he is. Look at that. Just like magic. I was just filling in for you there for a second. I was telling him about the moonwood that we did. And I was just saying that when Ron was here, when you sticker material, poplar was one of the other woods that you could use as a sticker instead of having to use the same identical wood to sticker material.
Exactly.
So, all right. Sandra, how about that next question?
Troy asks, can you outline this? He uses general finishes and they're oil-based products. Can you outline the steps you follow after the final coat of finish has been applied?
Okay, so they're oil-based finishes. I'm somewhat familiar with the general finishes I've tried. I've experimented with pretty much all of them, but they will react the same as most others. If the concern at the time is that you're not getting a real even coat, once that last coat dries, especially if it's been brushed on, and that occasionally is a problem, it doesn't look quite as smooth as they'd like it to. Normally, I would suggest then a real light sanding, say with the oil-based finishes, maybe 320 or so, just to scuff that surface and brush one more coat on perfectly. Sometimes, depending upon how well you're applying it, the type of brush you're using and those kind of things, means that your final coat still doesn't turn out quite like you thought. So my suggestion is, and I taught this last year at the class, two things. The first is when you're finished applying any coat of finish, you immediately suspend over the top of that project a piece of cardboard around 3/4 of an inch or so above that project. Because what happens is oil-based finishes take an hour, 2 hours to skin over. And the dust in your shop, because nobody's shop is that clean, slowly winds up falling from the air and winds up giving you all the little dust nib problems on their surface. So if you put that last coat on, put a piece of cardboard over the top and let it sit for a couple of hours, you can take the cardboard away. The surface isn't hard yet, but it's dry enough that if anything were to land on it, it would come off. So it'll right away provide a nicer look. Secondly, if that still is not what you're looking for, and almost all the finishes, and I think General does as well, sand that last coat down until it's nice and smooth. You shouldn't see any shiny spots. So lightly sand it until the entire surface is dull. You've got plenty of coats of finish on, and all you're doing is flattening that last coat of finish to make sure that it's nice and even. Lightly dust it, clean it up well, and spray on with a hand, just with a can of finish. Those are $7 or $8. Spray on a nice coat of finish, cover that with your cardboard top again. You'll have no brush marks. It'll be perfectly even. And all you'll be doing is using about $1 worth of spray out of that can. Your project will be perfect.
Well, look, man, now I've learned a good secret. See, I knew I should have been sitting in on your seminars. All right, Sandra, do we have another one?
It's cheating. But
what's that?
I said it's cheating, but at the same time, no one cares what process you used to get there. They're only interested in what it is you got. Wow. So if brushing it, and that's for a lot of people brush because they don't spray, which I wish they would, but they don't. But if they're brushing it, that's somewhat problematic to get a nice coat of finish on. But letting that coat dry nice and hard, then sanding it down so that it's dull and flat, and then spraying on your last coat and covering it right away it's a great way to provide a nice smooth surface.
I love it. I love it. All right, Sandra, what's his next? What's the next?
This is a question for you.
Uh-oh. I have to answer one.
This is from our friend Will Heavey.
Oh,
he
boy.
wants to know if Alex has ever made each of Santa's reindeer on a bandsaw.
I believe just about every.
Maybe not Rudolph.
Well, yeah, I've not cut myself. Yeah, I believe I have made maybe a dozen for each one of Santa's reindeers, all except for Rudolph. All right.
Jeff, our friend Jeff Hornong would like to know what would be a good project for someone who wants to get into woodworking because he's a turner.
There you go. That one's all you, Jim.
Oh, sure. Yeah, because I'm the as a turner, I guess I think simplistically probably the best way to get somebody into it is to turn a pen.
He is a turner, and he wants to know what would be a good woodworking project other than turning.
Oh, other than turning? Oh, shoot, that's easier. Yep. Because I'm thinking if Jeff is asking me questions about what is a good project to turn, I'm out.
Yeah, well, and my first go-to would have been bandsaw boxes.
Yeah,
but I'm pretty rough. You, on the other hand, probably have a better project in mind.
You know, I don't know that I do, although I know that there are quite a few projects that have some utility too. I know our magazine has done them in the past, and they're small little stools that also double as a seat, so that you can sit on it, but you can also stand on it. So like a two-step thing. So for kitchen, getting into one of those upper cabinets. When your grandchildren are coming to visit, some way for them to get up to the sink to be able to brush their teeth or wash their hands or whatever. And for a young person or a new person doing it, I think that it builds an awful lot of skills for as simple as they are. You can get the designs to be some pretty classy little things and work your way up into building something interesting. You can change the wood species, start with a poplar or start with pine even, but then work your way up and maybe do some more exotic woods and stuff once you learn the techniques. And then you can change the joinery on them to be box joints or dovetail joints or miter joints. So maybe a little stool that has some utility use and is relatively easy for the average person to do. I think that'd be a good start.
I like that idea. My grandson, his other grandpa built him this beautiful little, it's not so much a stool as it is a stand, because it allows him to be counter height, but it has rails that go all the way around so that he can't fall off. Yet he can get up there and help mom out with, vegetables and salads and things like that.
Perfect.
I think that's a great idea. Sandra, what's our next question?
Mark Spagnola.
Wants
to know from either of you.
Mr. Whisperer.
Yes.
What do you think it is about woodworking that makes it such a lifelong passion, even for guys like you that teach it all the time in addition to building?
I'm going to let you start, or do you want me to?
Well, either way, just first, just hi to Mr. Wood Whisperer and Nicole. It's nice to see. I just saw a picture of them.
Thank you for joining.
I just saw a picture of them today and realized that I had met him years and years ago in Arizona, and it was long before he had glasses and looked older. So driving in his car up there with her filming while they were driving. So it's nice to see him. Yeah, I think the passion from woodworking comes in general from people who just want to show some expression themselves. Do something that will have some lasting value either to them or to someone else. And I remember teaching a class where a guy came up afterwards, and he was a software engineer. And this was in the days when, they were making six-figure salaries in the late 80s. And so I said, so what would draw you to woodworking? And he said, because I have nothing to show my kids that I've ever made. He said, everything I've ever designed as a software project has either been hacked or improved within months after doing it. And he said, so I don't have anything to give to them. And he said, I'm doing this because I want something. I want something to give to them so that they understand that I care about them and all that stuff. And my joke is not a joke as much anymore, but when my kids were little, they didn't care at all what I did in the shop. I mean, it didn't make any difference to them at all. And then once they moved away, they steal everything they can. They're asking for stuff all the time, and it's fine. And I think that's the idea, that I think that's what keeps the spark alive. I think it's because we're all finite people, and we know that ultimately this is going to be our gift to somebody. And it goes back, like a big circle here, to talking about the shut up thing. Because when you give that gift to somebody, they're in awe. They can't believe that you spent the time and the energy and how much you care about them to make it. And I think that's why it's a very symbiotic thing. The people that get these things appreciate you even more, and your ability to try and make something you created or you copied or whatever to give to somebody makes you feel that you're more a part of their life and will be. So that's what I think.
Wow. I had the pleasure of meeting Mark and got to do a video with him, and I've gotten to see him at Mark Adams, and the guy is nothing but an inspiration. I mean, everything that he does, it's genuine. Mark is Mark, and he is, he's obviously concerned about his fans, but he is going to say what he thinks, and I absolutely love that.
And he's a family guy.
Absolutely.
He is a family guy.
You cannot see a better picture than him and his son making stuff, or Nicole and the kids out and about. Even when they're on vacation, they're taking photos. And every time that he shows a photo of the cutting board that I sent them, I beam. So, you know, I think probably the biggest passion for me, and you pretty much said it in a different way, is we all aim to please. We all aim to see someone smile. And when you hand them something that you made yourself, it wasn't something that was just a quick thought. It was something that you thought about, you figured out how to do it, and you made them smile. That to me is just everything.
Yep.
So, all right, Sandra, next question.
Jamie wants to know if you're ready to make some cabinets.
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, Jamie Sarver, he is a local cabinet maker, floor, tile, just an all-around master when it comes to doing household woodworking. He is the one that helped me do the cabinets that I made for Sandra's bathroom last year. Well, I always like to have a couple of projects going. So here in the office, I'm going to redo 2 walls of cabinets. And excuse me, my wife has just called 3. 3 walls of cabinets so that we can get this room squared away and she can kind of feel a little better about the office / liquor room.
I'm visiting.
Yeah. Well, now I will have to tell you that there was a special bottle that was delivered to me yesterday that I'll make sure that I save some when we have our yearly chat. Sandra?
Rick wants to know, he's recently put up a cleat wall. Is it okay to hang my bandsaw blades on a peg instead of wrapping them back in the box?
Absolutely. As long as you're not just slamming them on there to where you're bending the tooth. I keep all of mine on a peg hook, as a matter of fact. I like to kind of see what I have so that I can kind of see my different sizes, things like that. You can buy the little clips that are magnetic to stick to the side of your bandsaw. But honestly, I do like to keep mine on a peg hook so I can see exactly what my inventory is. That way, if I'm in the middle of a project, I can look over and say, okay, I've got another ½ inch there in case I break this one, that type of thing. So it's always good to see that inventory. All right.
Daniel would like to know if you've ever made a snowman.
You know, this is kind of a personal question. Anybody that knows me knows that I absolutely love snow. Matter of fact, I believe SNOW stands for stuff no one wants, I believe is the short for that. So Daniel, to answer your question, yes, I have made a snowman, but this is before I began to dislike snow as much as I do. And Jim, I know you love snow. You moved out of Chicago.
Yeah, you know, and I have to admit that the snow was occasionally annoying, but in a lot of cases, I don't know that I've ever been in an area of any kind that was as quiet and as serene as after a big snowstorm. And I know there's a physical reason for that. There's an audiological reason for that. But it's beautiful. And we had a lot of property where we were. We had we had planted trees that became very pretty. And it was a great way to enjoy it. The drawback was as it starts to thaw and stupid people get out and drive, that it made it less fun. But to be honest, there were times when it was that and we had a thing called hoarfrost, which I don't think I'll ever see here. That just it clung to the trees, and when you go out walking, the sun coming off of those would be like starbursts every place, and it was just really cool. And again, we'll never see that here. Tomorrow they're talking here, it's going to be 37, and I think if it weren't for the fact that people have already hoarded toilet paper, bread, and milk, for the coronavirus thing, they'd be out hoarding it because it may get a bit of a frost here. So
that's about it too. I thought winter was done. I'm out there working in the shop the other day, just beautiful, putting up shelves, putting in new benching. And yesterday, the wind turned to about 50 miles an hour. And today it was 50 and a high of like 40s. So it cut right through you. I spent most of the day in the shop working on tools, not working on the shop. So, Sandra? She's got nothing. No matter what.
Here's a question for Jim.
Sorry. I'll finish that in just a moment.
This is from our friend Scott Phillips. After finishing a project in lacquer, a month or two later, some splotches might appear. It's not the air I blow the project down, water entrapment. Is it the resin pockets bubbling up?
I think that's possible. I found an awful lot of cases when you put a finish on, regardless of the finish that you put on, flaws that show up there are generally considered a substrate problem. So there was something wrong with the wood. I shouldn't say wrong. Something in the wood, something on the wood that wouldn't allow that finish to bond well to it. Not a lot you can do if you don't know it right off the bat, because once you put that on, then you've kind of sealed in that issue. On some woods that have that tendency to do things silly, sealing it with a little bit of shellac will sometimes help, because that way at least now you've knocked down any potential for bleed through, and then you can put a finish over the top of that, de-wax shellac. But yeah, once it's on there, lacquer again is my favorite finish. I know it's got a lot of issues with it, but one of the things it is susceptible to is any kind of moisture. It doesn't like it in the air, doesn't like it on the piece, doesn't like it anywhere. And it will give you some adverse effects when that happens. So yeah, other than some real judicious prepping and testing a piece first to see whether or not that same species is going to give you a hard time, that's about the only way that I can think of trying to deal with this. Lacquer, fortunately, is fairly easy to get off. So if you have to, you could probably sand it down, let whatever happened on there happen, or seal it with some de-wax shellac and then shoot it again.
Yeah, and that, I think sealing it may stop some of that bleed through, but other than that, I wouldn't be able to think. Of course, you're the finish guy. Matter of fact, I have a question for you on finishing. You know the 3D cutting boards that I do, and I for years have told people that when you do use a cutting board, you strictly use mineral oil, nothing else, because mineral oil is the only thing that never goes rancid. Now, I do get every once in a while folks that do want a shinier board, and so what I usually do is I'll sand it as smooth as I can possibly get it. I'll hit it in the mineral oil, and I've got to let it kind of dry for a couple of days before I can add a beeswax to it to give it a little bit of a sheen. I don't suggest adding the beeswax to it when you add the oil like a combo, because what happens is it plugs up the pores before it gets all the way through, and I want that mineral oil to go all the way through. My question is, some people prefer even a shinier board, but I know if they touch it with a knife, it is just going to scratch the tar out of it. Is there any finish that you could suggest that would give you a little bit shinier, that would be a little bit more durable against the knife? I mean, considering that it's all end grain, it's a tall order, I know.
Yeah, and it is. It's the problem with the cutting board is that, well, to me, it's two things. The cutting boards that you make, for one, I'm surprised anybody uses as a cutting board, because people don't. I mean, I've made the same types of things, and I know that people don't use them because you make them out of something that makes it look really pretty. So you have two options. If you're going to use that for what it was designed for, I do believe that a penetrating finish like a mineral oil or something is probably the best overall bet, because it's easy to renew. If it ever gets bad, a real light sanding and hit it again with more oil will clean it up real nicely. If it's going to be displayed, then some kind of a top coat is fine. The problem with the top coat, if you decide that you're going to use it as a cutting board then, is that if you abrade that surface at all, and whatever the shoot was on that board gets in underneath that finish. So if it's, let's just say you're cutting up cheese, you're cutting up vegetables or whatever on there, and oil or whatever you're mixing for salad gets underneath there, you're done. Because that will then migrate underneath that finish. It can't get out anymore and bubbles the finish, and now you've got to strip everything off and start over. So there's not a lot of good options. I just as a personal thing, we're finishing up this lower level, and Donna's really high on the butcher block top, which she saw at one of the big box stores. And it comes complete. It's a big 25-inch thing, 8 feet long, and she wants a sink on it. So, and boy, I don't know what I'm supposed to. She's hell bent on doing this. So we did, and I just have to decide how it is I'm going to seal around the sink area, but at the same time provide some kind of a penetrating oil every place else, so that if something were to get cut on it, because it's going to be in a bar top, that I can easily fix it. So it's going to probably be some kind of a combination of maybe an epoxy around the cut edge and maybe 1/4 of an inch around the surface where the sink is going to sit on it. And then once that's all set and cured, then oil the daylights out of everything else is the only way that I can think about it. But yeah, that's my issue too. I don't know how you'll get a shiny finish on any kind of a penetrating finish whose job isn't to provide sheen. It's a job it's something whose job keeps something oiled. So I don't know how you do that.
Let me ask you one other way of possibly, and I have not tried this, but I've obviously thought about it, is actually soaking a board in a poly and then sanding it so that the poly is really, really deep into the wood. Would that create any issues?
I don't know. That's a good question. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if you can get, I know the poly will penetrate, but now whether or not it provides any kind of, if nothing else will get around it to begin to lift it or any of that kind of stuff, I don't know. So you're talking about putting a poly on, sanding it down, and maybe waxing the top or something, or
well, I just want to be able, a lot of people do love to use them as serving trays, and so that's things that I've struggled with. If anybody out there has an idea on how to make these cutting boards just a little bit tougher, so that they can take maybe just a little bit of use, but mostly as a serving tray, I'd love to hear some feedback on that. So, all right, Sandra says we have another question here.
Craig Walsh says, hi, Alex and Jim. You know it's Friday night, right?
You know Craig Walsh.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yes, Craig, we do. And as a matter of fact, it is 6:50. So, Jim, if you have not poured one, I think you're probably close enough to not have to worry about it.
That's true, and I could ask my able-bodied assistant to pour one up, but I'd have to be, the only way that I could do that is that the host also has to be able to do the same thing. Oh, shoot. Okay.
Miss Kitty's on it.
Miss Kitty is on it.
1792 and some ice in a glass. We were just informed it's Friday night. It is legal to drink, and it's late enough in the show. And Alex has already started. So, all right. So she's going to do that. She'll be fast enough that we'll be doing it. Oh my gosh! Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Someone gave that to me, so I couldn't pass up. It's kind of funny. Every weekend when we do the show, it's kind of a running thing. Usually on Friday or Saturday night, Jim comes by the booth, and as well as many other people. It's just kind of a nice end of the day way of enjoying a drink with friends, and we try not to get too cheap of stuff, just so because we don't get to drink a whole lot, but it's nice to have a nice little snocker at the end of the day, especially after working hard at the woodworking shows all day. So,
and okay. Here I thought we were keeping that such a secret.
Well, you know what? If you talk as much as we do at the shows in one day, you stop by the booth. I'll be glad to take care of you. Okay,
that's a fair trade.
You got another question?
What sprayer would you recommend for lacquer or shellac, and how many stages?
Shellac is fairly thin, so it doesn't have to be a super powerful one. Oh, here we go. Doesn't have to be a super powerful one.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers is right. I would suggest probably a 3-stage minimum sprayer, because my personal feeling is always buy any tool above your skill level, so that you have that ability in the future. If as your experience and your courage grows, you'll have the equipment to be able to do what it is you want it to do. So 3-stage minimum, and there's a whole bunch of brands out there, and the 3 that come to mind always are Airlix, Fuji, and Apollo. They all have their benefits. They all have their price points. So depending upon what the person is looking for, they can find a relatively inexpensive yet exceptionally well-provisioned sprayer in an Airlix. They can also move to one that's a little bit more expensive with slightly nicer features on it, I guess, in the Fuji. And then what I would consider kind of the Cadillac series of these, the Apollo on the other side of it. I have used and own all of those. I don't know that I trend necessarily one more than the other, but they'll all do a great job. I think that the key is just making sure that once you do get it, and you can find them, is to actually use it. Woodworkers have this tendency, especially with some of these what they think are more complicated things, it still sits in the box. You know, they keep thinking, next project I'll use it, next project. Once you start using it, a sprayer in particular, and I've taught this thing for years, once you start using a sprayer, you'll never go back to a brush. And once they realize that spraying lacquer and shellac and polys and water-based, it's so easy. That earlier question about how do I get a nice finish with oil-based things, you shoot an oil-based poly finish, and again, cover it with that piece of cardboard for an hour or two. You'll have a piece of glass that comes out of there when you're done. And it's cool. That's what I would suggest. So either one of those, any of those 3 would be fine. Most people are driven by price points, but then look at each one of those types of things. You'll find that they come with different specifications. Again, some have better features than others, but you're paying for it. And your decision will be based on how much you're willing to spend, but all of them will be fine.
Wow. I promise you, when you come up for our meeting, we're going to do our best to get a nice project going in the shop. There's going to be some filming. I'm excited about, matter of fact, I might even have a piece ready for you to finish. One of the toughest ones I can find.
Sure.
All right. One more question here. We got about 5 minutes, y'all. If you want to ask Jim a question, you got just a few minutes, because it is Friday night, and we do like to keep these right at about an hour. That way we're not keeping everybody past bedtime here.
Kelly Burns wants to know, Scotch or bourbon?
I personally am a bourbon man. Jim?
This particular one is a whiskey, 1792, bourbon whiskey. It's very good, but I like Scotch too, and I'm an equal opportunity drinker.
You know, I will drink some of the better scotches, but I'm all about my bourbon. I absolutely love bourbon.
And we've had some good ones together.
Amen. Amen. All right.
You have Peter McManus here. He's, I believe, from Scotland, and it's 12:50 a.m. there. So, shout out to him for staying up to watch you two.
Absolutely, Peter.
We'll give him all the time he wants.
Thank you so much for joining us, and you know, cheers. And matter of fact, I believe Jim was just your best friend if you like the scotch.
Oh yes, exactly. I'll give you my address. Yes.
Well, Jim, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out on Friday night to just come chat with us, and nothing real tough here. I hope it hasn't been too stressful. I hope we haven't let too many secrets out of the bag here, but you know, you've given us some great finishing techniques. Some neat stories, and I got to tell y'all, if you get a chance, read some of this man's articles. Matter of fact, if you get a chance, go to one of his seminars. I promise you'll not only learn something, but you'll laugh the whole time that you're watching Jim. He is truly an entertainer.
Well, see, that's why I wanted to come on, because you're so complimentary, and I don't ever hear that, you know, so it's just kind of nice to have somebody.
I know you, and you do not take a compliment very well. You immediately are like, stop it, you know, and yet I still see you up there talking to folks every day, working harder than just about anybody out there at the show. And I'm sure that it's because you enjoy what you do.
I love what I do, and that's the conundrum, you know, because I understand that, you know, one of these days it's probably going to, the 10-year thing. I kind of like the idea. I'm getting a dirty. But I love what I do. Who have the same affliction both of us do. We love woodworking. We like the camaraderie that it brings. I just think, how could anybody not enjoy that? So it's that's why I like it.
And you know, when you find out, one of my favorite things to do in my seminars, and I always kind of know the aha moments when I say something. And I'm not telling people something that I've learned from a book or I've learned from this or that. It's something that I had a breakthrough on. And I want everyone to know that shortcut. I want them to know how to make things work, or actually the easiest way to make things work. My father used to always tell me, if you just do the job instead of trying to do it the easy way, it would be done by now. Well, you know what, Dad? It finally paid off. I've always found the easy way.
Well, and that's the idea. I think our goal, and any teacher's goal, is to find a way to make sure that their students exceed their ability. You know, we hope to pass I teach beginning to middle of the road techniques. I want to see all these people out there making chest on chests and high boys and stuff, using some of the information they got from me, but going much further than that. And I think you feel the same way too. You want that next bandsaw guru out there, or somebody that's interested to find out how easy something is. And you showed them how it was easy to do, and then have at it. Just do it. I can't see hiding information.
You're giving them information that they would not have had, and shortening not only the project, but probably giving them a lot more fun and joy in doing it, instead of having to struggle and burn 3 or 4 of them before you get it done.
Exactly. And there always is, you know, I used to have a wood stove at home, and my feeling was that worst case scenario, it provided warmth.
There you go. I'm with you. Well, Jim, again, I am grateful for you taking the time this evening. I hope everybody's enjoyed speaking with Jim. I hope that this has worked out, and I'm going to try to watch this later so that we can see how well this came off. But any ideas for next week, it would be greatly appreciated. So by all means, post up And everybody thank Jim for taking the time. Jim, I'll talk to you here in just a few minutes. Everybody stay safe.